Mike. I actually just wanted, this is Noelle, and I just wanted a little bit of clarification before we moved on. I apologize, I'm just trying to make a connection here. We talk about, I mean, from a school point of view, we do teach like the microderm, the chemical peels, all of those things that are in our curriculum. I'm hearing that there's another HLO rule on curriculum, or on, not on curriculum, but on chemical peels and dermaplaning. And I'm wondering how that connects with PCS and what what our curriculum is, where we're drawing our curriculum from.
So the reason the board decided to write that rule is because it's above and beyond. It's above and it's allowed in the scope of practice, and if the school teaches it, great. But if it's someone like Deborah who has been in the profession for X number of years and didn't get the training, then she would go out and get, I think it's 6 hours of training. And 2 hours have to be, maybe that's dermaplaning. I have to read it, but
Okay.
so it would be in addition to that if they wanted to practice those services.
So as a school, then are we asking people to layer on that like a certification that you did receive this chemical peel, that you did receive microderm training, or is it
Dermaplaning?
yes?
Yeah, so they would need to, well, if they get it in school, hold on, let me see. I don't want to mistalk here. Where did they go? Okay. So this doesn't even reference the curriculum. So it may reference it once if HLO and the board get 217, that might be wise. It doesn't specify if this is continued education or in school education, so it could be in school. So if you did say teach it under discretionary hours, then they would be covered, and they would just want to keep that documentation, which could be their transcript, with that extra hours in it. And for them, let me find
So
it.
their transcript would be enough if it said that on there.
Yes. Record. So dermaplaning is 6 hours of required education and training, a minimum of 2, must be hands-on. So just documenting, and you guys give them an extra certificate, and that kind of is whatever the school wants it to look like.
So the school would need to give them a certificate.
Well, that, or yeah, hold on, I gotta look again. Hold on. It's in a funny place. Oh, here it is. Educate. So if it education must be obtained through a school, institution, vendor, or practitioner, proof of education or training must include name of, we actually use continuing education sponsor or provider, course, agenda and outline, documentation of attendance and successful completion of, including certificate, transcript, sponsor statement, affidavit, attesting to attendance, or diploma. So it's pretty broad. I think that you could give them something special or put it on their transcript. I think either one, just so it's being called out and that they had that 6 hours.
Okay, I mean, I know that the transcripts only call out what Oregon actually requires, and that we don't individually write them. So if they're getting that additional training, then it would have to.
Yeah, it would.
Okay.
I mean, there's nothing saying you couldn't add it to the transcript. The transcript is obviously a guide that we give, but There could be additions to it.
Okay.
It's not required by rule. It just says the official transcript must include a certain number of things, which you have on yours or any school. And then you could include other stuff if you wanted to.
Okay.
These are very good questions. Did that answer them?
It does, but I am curious then, if we change anything in that as it pertains to a school, then does that get communicated to to the schools? So we know
Say that again.
if we change anything here that does pertain to curriculum education, does that then get communicated to them?
Well, because it's not required in the education, but I know that we sent them to all estheticians, so hopefully people got those.
Okay.
And I can resend them, of course. Sounds like I might need to send a communication. Yeah, so since it's not technically in the curriculum, then then no, we wouldn't communicate it as you must have. But
Okay.
if 217 passes, we'll just pick up what HEC has been requiring initially. But down the road, HLO and the board will hold, curriculum committees, just like Cerinthia and Karen did last time, where all the schools come for each field of practice, and maybe they decide to add that in. So those are all definitely things that could happen, but for now, since it's not listed specifically in curriculum, and I think most of the time it must be taught under discretionary hours, I don't know. That we're calling it out separately.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Good question. Okay. No hands are up. Whitney, did you have your hand up earlier? Okay. So advanced aesthetics, let's kind of go through this one. So pursuant to 676-633, the board and the Board of Cosmetology developed the definition of device. It's the same thing as regular aesthetics. Advanced esthetician is limited to performing services that are non-ablative as defined in ORS 634 and 690-005-005. And that definition is so the rule definition, I think, is the same. Non-ablative means involving an action performed on the hair or skin of a person that does not result in wounding of the skin or underlying tissue as defined in 676-630. That's what that refers you to. Advanced esthetician is limited to services performed on the hair and skin. Does that all sound good? Additions, subtractions, changes? Okay. 2, an advanced non-ablative aesthetic device must be capable of performing procedures that are in conjunction with the following modalities or services. Skin rejuvenation, photo rejuvenation, body contouring, dyschromia reduction, cellulite reduction, and hair removal or reduction. So that's just the list of modalities that's in the law. Little b, be a U.S. FDA registered device pursuant to 676-647 to perform advanced non-ablative aesthetic procedures. Advanced non-ablative, oh, someone good? Just moving right along. Okay, so, and the next one is, that's weird. Hold on. It'll be, that's wrong. A device, this is how it would be, must be a US FDA registered device pursuant to 676-647 to perform advanced non-ablative aesthetic procedures. An advanced non-ablative aesthetic device is a laser intense pulse light. This is something that you guys added last time. A piece of equipment or mechanism that shares the same common characteristics as laser and intense pulse light devices and is designed to serve a special purpose or special function related to advanced non-ablative aesthetic procedures and is capable of performing non-ablative aesthetic procedures on the skin or hair. That's still good? Is it advanced? Okay, D is an aesthetic device defined under the rule. Oh. I don't, that doesn't make any sense. I think that one is deleted. A certified esthetician may use an aesthetic device beyond the epidermis. That is the last one. Additions, subtractions, conversation.
Sammy, this is Heather. I think we want to specify in 4 that you can use one of those aesthetic devices that meets the requirements of the CAE device. So we want to tie it back into that it meets the CAE device.
So it would be 3. Okay. Comments, corrections, additions, subtractions. Helene, Suzanne, go.
Hi, this is Hélène. To me, may use an aesthetic device beyond the epidermis doesn't make any sense. I mean, which action goes beyond the epidermis? I think it should be sort of referring to the opposite of what we just did for the regular aesthetic. I mean, like it's the action of it or the effect of it. Sorry.
Okay. So would it be an advanced esthetician device that meets the requirements of 3 of this rule? No. Hold on. Go back and see what we wrote on the other one. Ah, that's the same one. So similar to this one.
Hi, this is Hélène. Yeah, that would say something can penetrate beyond the epidermis, or that may penetrate.
Let's see if we can fix this. Is that close? And then I'll tie in number 3. The epidermis. Okay. May perform CAE services that go beyond the epidermis using devices listed in subsection 3. Boo. This rule. Is that right? Close? Clean? No, yes? Suzanne, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. We definitely need to define similar traits to laser and IPL a little bit better. I'm not sure with referring back to the CAE on number 4 that you just wrote. If we define that out, that might make more sense, but it's really confusing because I'm thinking about the characteristics like lasers and IPL. Are we talking the same classification? Just let's take radio frequency as an example. So we have some devices are very high energy. They fall into a different classification than the radiological devices like laser and IPL. But how would we compare, or are we strictly looking at the categories of services as a guideline that are listed?
Let me think about that. So you're saying what is the common characteristics, and in some cases they may not be the same at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's high energy. I mean, the common things I'm trying to think like IPL, plasma, some faradic current, which actually works directly on the muscle, and different types of lasers. I mean, lasers is so broad, and IPL is pretty broad, so you could fit all light therapy in there. But
So
plasma
the point of this is supposed to help. So if it's not helping, we need to fix it.
Yeah, put it together.
And I think what I'm hearing you say is, that all of these services, A through G, can be used to other devices, so laser, IPL, and then other devices, to perform these procedures. And there are other devices besides laser and IPL that can do this, but that don't use like the same energy or wavelengths or whatever, right? So we really need to find a different word. Maybe it's not common characteristics. Is there the same risk involved in all of the modalities or
Close.
devices?
Yeah, I think that we could say share some of the same risks because there are some common things that you see between lasers and high energy. Burns are one of the things I'm thinking of. So high frequency can burn at a very deep level, so can a laser misapplied. So there are some common things, but I'm not sure if that would be enough.
Okay. Anybody
know.
have any suggestions? So we could, what if we said, I mean, I guess that's a question for, Deborah and, Helene. When you were working on the bill, did you know that there would be other devices besides intense pulse light and lasers that would have completely different common characteristics?
This is Deborah. Yes, we are aware of that, but referring back to that it is used for aesthetic purposes, not for medical or medical diagnosis or treatments. I think that would then, and it was non-ablative, would then capture in all of those devices that would be in advanced aesthetics that would fit within those criteria of those categories. I would refer back to that statute that says it's not for medical or medical diagnosis, and it's an aesthetic device, non-ablative aesthetic device.
I think.
Part of the problem is the FDA doesn't recognize non-ablative aesthetic. That's our terminology. So when we're looking at something that's used like radio frequency that is used to tighten the skin, the way this is written, we can use that, but it doesn't have common characteristics with a light therapy like laser, or I'm sorry, IPL versus laser. So I don't know if we need to get more specific within the listing of that or talk about classification. But because FDA says it's a medical device, everything is a medical device to the FDA. And so that's where we get into this back and forth that gets to be difficult. But every device that is used for any of those categories, like skin rejuvenation, I would think would fall into that as long as it's not ablative.
Has a burn risk versus injury to eye. So I think all of them would have a tissue injury or burn risk versus, eye risk.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the most common.
Suzanne and Taylor,
safety
sorry.
issue.
I feel like my mind keeps going back to what Deborah brought up earlier, and somebody else had said it. I can't remember her name, but she's on here, about like the actual effect on the structure. Because if you think about advanced devices, it is always affecting the structure of either the cells or anything like that. So, and that's very different. That's very different than what we talked about for basic aesthetic devices. You talk about lasers, radio frequency. I know we had talked about acoustic wave a lot, and all of those are physically affecting the structure. And so I think what Deborah said earlier, that makes sense to have that categorization, I guess.
I'm looking for what you're talking. I'm looking for the rule. So maybe, so we talked about 0100067 not having it in cosmetology because this is what kind of spurred the law change for 2970. But maybe part of what I'm hearing Taylor say is that this part of this could go in advanced aesthetics. So I think what you're talking about is a product intended to cure, mitigate, treat, or prevent disease or affect the structure or function of the body. So referencing that, and that's what the FDA determines as a device. So what an esthetician uses is not a device because it's just to keep the skin luminous. That's what this is saying, but that may not be true anymore. But is that what you're pinpointing that better?
I just think it kind of has like that segregation between devices of one is affecting the structure, or like whether it's through destruction. I mean, typically with lasers, you're going to see a lot of destruction underneath the surface of the skin. And then basic aesthetic devices, we chose not to bring that up because the devices are doing that through like a physiological effect and not a physical effect of the device, if that makes sense.
No comments? Deborah. Deborah?
The only thing that I would say as we're using that we do structure and function, then we have to be very careful that we're not getting ourselves into the medical arena because we have to be very careful. But if we refer back to the aesthetics and not for medical purposes reference, that we are using devices that are aesthetic in nature versus
actually,
even though, they're considered a medical device.
Actually,
I'm sorry?
In 676, 635,
Mm-hmm.
it says notwithstanding ORS 677080, a certified advanced esthetician may practice advanced non-ablative aesthetic procedures. And that's the Oregon Medical Board's law. Basically, it's a carve out saying
Right.
the things that advanced esthetician are doing are medical. Obviously, you're not doing all of them.
But they're not for diagnosis of disease or disorder. I'm just saying, yes,
Okay.
we're using medical devices. We're doing aesthetics, not medical. I mean, I'm just there. We do use devices that are for aesthetic purposes, is what I'm saying.
Got it. So maybe add in.
We're not going to be charged with practicing medicine without a license. We are practicing aesthetics, but it's not. But we are very careful not to use the word medical in any way.
Could the term, this is Maria, could the term cosmetic help in any of that?
I don't know. I'm just making some notes here.
Sammy, this is Heather. While you're making some notes, I'll just jump in. Deborah, the part that you're referring to regarding not for medical diagnosis or treatment is in the statute pertaining to the cosmetology laws, but it's not in the statute pertaining to certified advanced aesthetics. So I think that specific wording that you're looking at is in the cosmetology laws. If you go back to the flow charts, you can see how it falls in. So I just want to make sure to orient where we are at.
Heather, could you use similar language as, I mean, can an esthetician diagnose and all of that? I don't think so. Treat, diagnose, maybe, I don't know.
No, estheticians cannot practice as doctors. I mean, they're not going to be doing that type of work. They're, as Deborah said, they are exempt from those laws of being from practicing, but they still have to be doing the advanced non-ablative aesthetics that's defined in statute. So what they're doing on skin and what they're doing on hair has to be a procedure that relates to skin rejuvenation, photo rejuvenation, body contouring, and that's where the scope aspect comes in. But that is separate from what is in the COS laws that say it's not for medical diagnosis or treatment of disease or physical or mental ailment. So we just want to remember what the statute is showing for our scope. So they can't practice as doctors. They can't do diagnosis, but by use of a laser, it's saying you can use this laser and you're not going to be the laws in 6077, the medical laws don't apply when you use that later for the purposes of doing your advanced aesthetics work.
So maybe,
but it doesn't give you permission to diagnose.
Can you please put your phone on mute? Can you please put your phone on mute? Sorry. Hold on, I'm typing something. Getting the thought down. Services. Okay. Let me share my screen. I think I understand what Heather was saying. That. Okay, here we go. So something like this, I think. Oh, I can't see your faces. Pursuant to 676, 635, OMB laws under 6 ORS 677-080. That's the number. Yeah, 080 do not apply when a certified advanced esthetician is performing services related to advanced non-ablative aesthetics procedures. Does that help? Rather than tying it back, what I think I'm hearing Heather say is the cosmetology laws tie it back to medical diagnosis, treatment, disease of physical ailments specifically. And then what your law does, I think, to allow or draw a line is that when you're doing services as an advanced esthetician, you can do medical services limited to what's defined in advanced non-ablative aesthetic procedures. Does that make sense? And does that get us there? Is it clearer? Does it make the rule clearer? No. Okay, Deborah, Alyssa, Alicia, and Suzanne, Deborah.
Sorry. I mean, it does make it clear, but referring back to this makes it sound like we are practicing medicine, which we're practicing advanced aesthetics using medical devices. So I don't know. I don't know if that helps. I think I don't. You know, I guess I'd be curious to hear what Suzanne has to say. I'm going to yield my comment.
This is Alicia. The only thing that's popping into my mind is with acne and things like that, when people go for acne treatments or with microneedling and all that to like cure acne, or you see the befores and afters. This person had a medical condition. This device is clearly ablative and is fixing this medical condition. How can that still be done? Which I think it should be allowed, but it seems like it would be excluded with this. Anyway, that's all. That's my thought.
Maybe, I don't know. Can you say that again, Alicia? I was not listening to you at all. Sorry.
Oh,
I'm being
I don't
honest.
care. I was just thinking about the treatment of acne with microneedling or all that. That's, you know, you see a lot of befores and afters, even on Instagram, of like, hi, this person had acne, or all this live cysts happening, and then 4 treatments of microneedling and the skin is clear. You know, it seems like this definition would, because I do think microneedling is ablative, so I don't know how that will be allowed technically, but I'm not sure about that. That's just, I had acne, so that's why that came to my mind, is I don't think that would have been allowed for my treatment if this definition was either followed or even the actual definition at the time I was getting that treatment. That's all.
Okay, I'm gonna let Heather chime in because she may have a reference to specifically what Alicia said, and then Suzanne, and then Taylor.
Thanks, Sammy. I just wanted to say I wasn't advocating that that be included in the rule necessarily, or that it makes it clear. I just want to make sure that we're not using language from the COS statutes in the CAE rule that actually would be wrong, because there isn't that limitation from the COS statute. So I'm not advocating to have that in. It's up to the RAC whether they think it's good or good in terms of clarifying the rule, but just wanted to make sure everyone was aware that what it states in relation to medical diagnosis or treatment is only in relation to the COS esthetician. So that was the clarification point I was making. Sorry for the confusion.
Okay, Suzanne and then Taylor.
Hi, thank you. I think non-ablative we defined pretty well in the existing rule, right? So that's full thickness removal of skin. I remember us having a discussion about it at one point. So let's take microneedling as an example. That isn't technically ablative because you're not pulling off live tissue, but you are potentially working with someone who has acne. So I guess the question is, I think how you've defined it, especially going back to the advanced esthetician law, which was not the target of the initial law that was just passed, those definitions weren't changed. So if we can just clarify that these devices are non-ablative and fall within the listed categories, that makes it broad, but you can do position statements about specific devices and maybe take out treatment. Because if someone comes to me with acne, I already know they have acne. I'm not diagnosing and I'm not treating like a medical person, but I do have the side effect of improving that in the skin. So I can see Deborah's point around this sounds like we're trying to practice medicine, and we definitely don't want to do that, but we are dealing with, you know, different types of skin that they let us know about technically. I don't know if that makes sense, but it seems like we're adding a level of complexity. I think that it's going to make it difficult, whereas those categories of services are pretty clear. And it's non-ablative right there too. So I don't know that we have to get that in detail, but maybe some detail on position statements, just like we did for chemical peels and microderm or dermaplaning, if that makes sense.
Okay, so going back to 3c, and we talked about the common characteristics. Do you want to leave it as that? Or you want to expand on it? The reference that, use the reference that, or some form of the reference that Taylor made. It sounds like don't do the pursuant to 676, 635. That seems like it would complicate things more. We already have a rule up here that says advanced esthetician is limited to performing services that are non-ablative. So you've checked that box, Suzanne. And maybe that's what I think what you're saying is that might be enough. And if we ever wanted to expand, then it would be likely in a position practice clarification. Taylor, and then Helene.
Well, one thing I was going to say is the big, especially just coming from like a training perspective, when we train students, we are very, very specific to not use the word cure. We tell our students, you are not allowed to diagnose your patients. You are not allowed to use the word, I can cure your acne. That's never something that that I think most estheticians on this call can agree. We're never going to say that to our clients. So there's no misleading in that area. And then I think if we're just going to leave common characteristics, then I would go back to just like, and then also going back to what we did for basic aesthetics and then the same common risk factors. Because that makes the most sense to me.
I like common risk factors. That sounds really good. Common risk factors.
Is that good? Okay. Helene and then Suzanne.
Hi, this is Hélène. Yeah, I just wanted to say that when we went for the legislative to change the legislative status, we did it for the aesthetics, not really, we didn't intend to change anything for the advanced aesthetics. So, you know, I don't know, unless the definition of the device before was wrong, I don't think we should touch it too much, but that's my opinion.
Well, law says we have to do something. Right? I think it says it where, somewhere.
Well, in
Hold
that
on.
case, that's kind of back to what I said at the beginning, that, you know, the difference in my mind between esthetician and advanced esthetician is they are allowed to go beyond the epidermis. I'm repeating it.
So what are you suggesting?
What I'm suggesting, we leave it as is, and if we really want to add something, is just clarify that as an advanced esthetician, you can go beyond the epidermis, and I actually like this, the common risk factor. That's a good idea as well.
So leave little
But I'm
c.
not an advanced, so.
So leave it as it,
Yeah.
we've written it here?
Mhm.
Okay. Comments, questions? Does this feel like it looks right? Or some version, I gotta go back and clean things up. Hearing, oh, Whitney.
I was just looking at the last one that you added. Is that supposed to say any? I wasn't sure what the ANE stood for. If it was like,
Number 4.
yeah, number 4 says association may perform. Is it?
Oh,
is that
that's
being-
advanced non-ablative aesthetic.
Oh,
I
okay.
just didn't want to type it out.
Okay, cool. I was like, well, I'm not sure what I'm reading.
What does
Okay.
that mean?
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thanks.
Is that a new device or service I don't know about? That's funny. Okay, hearing nothing else. I'm gonna move on. Congratulations. Proud of you guys. So now we need to talk about the racial equity statement and fiscal impact. Let me find that document now. Whitney provided me with some that she thought, so I'll just kind of go off her. So I think we can look at this in several different ways, and I'd like to hear from you guys first before I chime in, because I can always add things later based on other rules that we've done. Just trying to pull the document. Second. Nope, that's not right. Oh, let me stop sharing my screen. Okay. Hold on. Technical difficulty. close that. Okay, sorry about that. Ugh. All right, I'm just gonna have to. If you guys want to start talking about it while I find the document, feel free. So you could talk about it in Whitney?
Well, definitely, I shared the document with you, and I just know that, you know, just something to be concerned about is the actual numbers of what it could cost either a business or an individual to pursue advanced, and also what it entails. And, you know, whenever we change a law, that definitely can greatly impact, first of all, anyone who's been practicing in a certain way, who has invested funds and money, time, and education into certain things, and then suddenly the law changes drastically. It can really impact people and make them lose a lot of money. And I just kind of felt that I did a lot of research to see kind of who was using devices more like for their complete kind of aesthetics business versus just doing like a basic facial or something like that with like lotions. And I just found that it tended to really favor, I would say, the African American community, the Hispanic community, and I mean, that is actually very, very prevalent. And typically we're talking about also like lower socioeconomic background. And just to be realistic, we're looking at numbers, and also possibly even talking about community where people have certain disabilities or things like that, that maybe they couldn't per se, because we had someone on the call last time who had a disorder, seizure disorder, could not do lasers, but probably could do other things. And so what accommodations can we make for people who can't really afford or don't want to spend upwards of $20,000+ to get their advance, but they can maybe do some portions of that, especially if they have a disorder that doesn't allow them to perform certain services, but other ones are okay. I just think we need to think a lot about that, and also what it's going to truly cost, even the Oregon Health Licensing Office, because every time we enact a new law or a new rule, that means that people have to enforce it, and that means training needs to be done. There can be more calls. Anytime we add regulation, it does, you know, we need manpower to enact it. So these are just some things that I was just thinking about, you know, just keeping things from being too drastically changed, so that people can continue to practice, I think, you know, responsibly, but also in a sense freely within their license, you know, that they can be creative with their services, and that we're monitoring for, you know, keeping people safe, but not to completely control our aesthetic community, allowing them to kind of grow in their practices. So there's a couple of things I was thinking of.
Anybody have any? Well, I can just, okay, hold on. I'm going to address one thing, and then Suzanne. The only way to say to have individual modalities that could be practiced, so if somebody would only go to school for tattoo removal, would be to call them out as fields of practice and say, you can just do this. Otherwise, the way the law is written is you got to learn it all. So that's kind of, yeah. So like body art has, and even cosmetology has natural hair care. So it's a subset of hair design. So to individualize it would be basically what you would be doing. Yeah, so there's that.
And I'm not saying that we would have to do that. It's just things that were like running across my mind as we make legislative changes and who's affected and how they're affected. And, you know, really ultimately also having the goal to allow people to work and to make a living wage for themselves and to create opportunity in our state for the people here in our state. And so that, you know, for me, a big importance and focus, and that especially when people you know, are pursuing their licensing, that we're also creating an environment where people can work and excel in their work and make a living wage being able to do it. So I'm not really saying like separate anything, but just some stuff I just thought of.
Okay, Suzanne. Suzanne.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted a little bit of clarification on, and I hear what you're saying, Whitney. I totally get it because it's an issue all over the place. But we also have a certain level of licensing and a professional standard. So my first question is there other licensing entities, let's say like an LCSW, professional counselor? Are there things in other licenses that allow for modification for someone who has a disability, or, you know, some of those issues that Whitney brought up about the ability to do a treatment? And then the other comment I have is, I mean, the advanced aesthetics law already exists. So the original financial impact happened when that was implemented, what, 4 or 5 years ago now? So would these rules actually cause more economic impact because it was a little bit stricter, even if you followed the law when it was originally passed? With this new law, shouldn't it open it up more, or am I misinterpreting what that impact would be?
I think maybe both. So, so I definitely will glean from that original stuff, from back in 20, I don't remember what year it was now, 2019? Yeah, no, 2017, 2015? Oh, I think it was 2015. That's a long time ago. From that, so like what Whitney said about the education and seeking that, I think it did add things for sure into aesthetic scope of practice, but potentially could be removing things that people are currently stopped using before, or may even be currently using it because we haven't defined device in both aesthetics and advanced aesthetics. So I think it could go both ways. I think maybe you say it. So in a fiscal impact, we really want to call out all the possibilities. So it's to put people on notice that this could affect you fiscally, you know, and it's really specifying small business, units of local government, the public. And whenever I write a fiscal impact, I consider a licensee the public. So I would write anything that would affect you as well, plus like customers. So I will call all those things out. So I think that's a good point. And I think we would just explain that, of the possibility. Deborah?
As far as the fiscal impact in the original, the reason we had to write the new law was because the advanced law rules were actually limiting the scope of practice for a standard esthetician and made a huge fiscal impact on a standard esthetician. So we're actually increasing the capabilities of being able to practice for the basic esthetician. There are always going to be devices out there that fall into areas that we don't know. And as our industry grows and changes, which is one of the industries that it seems to always have new gadgets out there, there are always going to be people that don't know and that are making assumptions about a device because the manufacturer says it's benign or it's non-invasive or whatever. But and as far as for them to lose out on making that decision and getting the training before the rule was written or before it was defined, there may be some fiscal impact. But our goal in this was to, and I believe will greatly impact this rule writing most estheticians in the state of Oregon. And that was our goal.
Greatly impact them in the positive?
Yes,
Positively?
in the positive.
Okay, Suzanne.
Sorry, I forgot to take my hand in.
Oh. Anybody want to chime in? So there'll be some impact on HLO. We have to make these rules, maintain the rules. I don't know. I mean, there may be more impact on investigations. I don't know. It's hard to say, but I would definitely call that out in case we have more complaints about estheticians using devices that don't fit in the flowchart or in this rule. So I'll denote enforcement or regulatory and an increase, and then with regulatory increase is usually a G increase. So so there will be a cost to HLO. Just writing this down. As a possibility. I'm not saying that it will. And I think that would just be for COS probably. I'm just reading through Whitney's just to get some ideas. Whitney, do you have something?
Oh, just I was what you wrote when you said use economic impact from HB 279. You just said prior there were FDA limitations since FDA registered devices were in the scope of CAE. Now FDA is not. I was just wondering what did that mean? I think I maybe missed that because I thought that they were required to do FDA, or am I confused?
No. Yes and no. So before 2970, it was actually wrapped into the scope. So it said a CAE can only do lasers and other devices registered with the US FDA. So that immediately pulled all US FDA registered devices away from aesthetics. So we moved the big part of what the bill did was remove that piece, but it does require it somewhere else, but it doesn't make it part of the scope. So it doesn't pull all of those devices with the FDA and give it only to the CAE. Now COS has that ability to use those as well. They still have to do it, use those devices, but it broadens it. So
Okay.
I know that was confusing for people.
Thank you.
So hard to get my mind around at that time too. So you're not in the dark. Small business, less than employee. I mean, I think potentially there could be some impact to estheticians who are currently using some devices that don't fit into your definition or the flowchart or the law. And so that could have some economic impact on them to stop using the service. So they wouldn't be getting that money. I think that's something that we probably should just, it is what it is, and call it out. And then I would also tie this back to small business, that in some cases, these CAEs are small businesses. So you can see how the round robin goes when I write these. Yeah. Anyone can just chime in. I'm not necessarily looking at hands. I'm trying to, but
I guess for me, yeah, was the one thing I was thinking of like businesses or private, like practicing estheticians in general, with the law being, first of all, it went back and forth and it's all been pretty recent. And then it's been kind of gray, a lot of gray area, a lot of like not sure and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, people are going to be investing in their business. They're going to be investing in their livelihood. And as we live in a technological world, and speaking of devices specifically on this rack, people are investing in technology, which is devices generally for, for aesthetics. It's not going to be like a software or something. It's going to be a device. And that's how people can expand their repertoire of what they can offer people and increase results, etc. So that's one of my just concerns, is that, anyone who's established anything during this time or purchased equipment. And we also have to remember that equipment is probably the most expensive thing that you can invest in terms of aesthetics. There's pretty much no product or anything that's more expensive than investing in a technological device. So it's just something to really think about, because we're not just talking about a peel. Oh, I can't do this chemical peel anymore, but we're talking about pretty expensive pieces of equipment that people probably invested in, a few $1,000s plus. I mean, the devices can go as high as, $150,000, $250,000. And, businesses probably have hired according to what can be done. And so there might be a mix of advanced and basic working on their staff. And then, depending on how things change, you may need to change your staff, and that's going to create more layoffs for people. And so there's a big trickle down effect. It's just a lot of things to think about. Because of the expense of the device and how it can change really even hiring practices.
Tina?
Yeah, hey, it's Tina. I was just curious, what would be an example of something that someone has brought in that they may not be able to use now, especially if they're just a basic?
Well, would be anything that, I don't know. That's for you guys to tell me. There's all kinds of different technologies and devices. So radio frequency, maybe, I don't know. Cavitation, maybe. There's all kinds. So the only way we will know is by using the flowchart and the rule that you guys have created. I will state this, is that we have tried to explain, which is not easy, and we understand that we do have these laws in place, that we haven't got them completed, but and that we would, if say there was a complaint, that we would use the scope of the law to apply that complaint to an investigation. So if a esthetician was using, let's say, radio frequency, today we don't have the device rule. So, but we would use what's listed in the law, both laws, to determine if it's in the scope or not. It'll be easier when we have this, but that's another mechanism that you can determine scope of practice is through, legal advice, and then through a complaint, which then trickles down to this was the end result. So this is now part of the scope, since it's been vetted. That's not easy to understand. I know that. I feel, I know. Deborah, and then Tina, Tina, are you done? Deborah.
Am I unmuted? There we go. Sorry. Yeah, there is going to be, I know there are, like the hyaluron pin. All the girls saw it at the trade shows. They came out and they had this hyaluron pin that was doing, lip injections, and they were doing trainings for that and all that. But, and then of course, now that the FDA shut that down, and the agency has, made statements on that. I think that there's always going to be a device that we have to look at determinations, and it is going to affect people that are early inventors. They jump in and they buy something without knowing what what or not if it would be in the scope. So, I mean, there's nothing we can do to prevent that. There's always going to be a certain fiscal impact for that, because this industry is so unregulated when it comes to devices. But I don't think that's preventable, but there will be some fiscal impact to that coming up. But I think it's an individual's responsibility that if they're willing to take the risk to buy some device prior to knowing whether or not for sure it's in a rule, then that's unavoidable.
Can you hear me? Okay, because I'm frozen on the screen. Do I look frozen? Can you see me moving? Okay, well, I'm frozen as long as you guys can hear me. Okay, I got that. I captured that. Deborah, well, I am capturing it. Anything else? Let's see. So in Whitney's, she talks about the cost for advanced aesthetics. So I'll definitely reference that there's an additional cost if they want to use these types of devices, and I'll list that cost. A lot of that stuff is in the previous, when we originally wrote the rules for CAE, so I'll glean from that. Number of small businesses, I don't know why I never thought about looking at Secretary of State. I know it exists, because usually I just say this is how many cosmetology facilities, but this might give me a better number. So, does it say on Secretary of State's page, does it get down to like women-owned businesses?
It was just, you kind of, what I did was I just searched, because you can search by name, so it's not like going to be perfect. It's certainly not going to be probably a completely accurate number. I just tried to search like names that would be aesthetically driven, and kind of then you can kind of see who's registered, kind of aesthetic types. Obviously, I don't have access to HLO and like who's has listed licenses. I didn't look there. I just looked at Secretary of State, because I figured it also would probably encompass people who are out there doing other things, or I don't know. That's kind of where I looked. I just went through Secretary of State, so you can search businesses, and I put in kind of keywords that I thought would bring up aesthetic type places, and then I just kind of added it all together according to what they practiced.
Yeah, unfortunately, and you guys know this, to narrow down aesthetics it becomes gray, and the number is very large, but we know the people actually practicing aesthetics like to the fullest is much smaller than what we have licensees for, right? So this might give me some idea. Again, it's just putting people on notice. We're giving them an idea. But I appreciate that, because again, especially for the aesthetics profession, it's not a gray area. I'm trying to think of the word. It looks like this giant number of practitioners, but people who are actually doing these types of services is much smaller. And I don't know what that number is, unfortunately. So anything that we can do to get that closer will be great. Taylor and then Alicia.
I was just thinking, I don't even know if this would, I mean, I guess it is the fiscal impact, but if obviously we're creating these rules to define what devices fit into each category. So if that opens up devices to be moved into basic aesthetics, then those are devices that training facilities will want to include in their curriculum. So that could also mean that training is going to go up in cost for either basic aesthetics or vice versa. If those devices get moved to advanced aesthetics, then that cost could go up, because you're essentially creating more curriculum that needs to be covered.
Can you give me an example?
Like, for example, like microneedling, right? So if we moved, like, if we just say somebody finally decides, like, is that going to fit into both? Is it a crossover device? Right now in our curriculum, we don't teach it in the basic. So if it were to become a crossover device and it was finally fully categorized, then teaching that in that curriculum is going to, one, take it away from our advanced curriculum, so it creates room for something else. And we would probably have to invest in more like actual pens, things like that. Class sizes would probably be a little bit bigger. I just see it. There's going to be a fiscal impact as far as like cost for the program for students if we're adding in specific curriculum that wasn't there before.
Good. That's good. Dun, 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 dun. Whitney.
I just wanted to mention that generally from what I see is that most people who are estheticians and in either advanced or basic, who we're working with typically is coming from a lower socioeconomic background. They typically don't have higher level education, and they're looking to the licensing to create a way to make a career for themselves. They typically can come from backgrounds where there may not even be, you know, high school diplomas or definitely not college diplomas. And so it's just something to really think about that within our community. And then also another one is like immigrants and, you know, ESL and things like that. I mean, I've listened to a lot of board meetings. We have a lot of people struggling even to get their license just because of the language barriers and things like that. And that just really typically tends to draw people to aesthetics because it's something they can do, they can perform. I just never want to be too exclusionary with people who are trying to make a career for themselves and typically come from those backgrounds. And I think that is a large majority of people who are pursuing aesthetics, that it truly is a trade. You know, it's considered a trade and a license, and that we want to make it, it's always accessible financially, and also time-wise. We have a big issue, I think, with a lot of our advanced programs that there's not enough options for finances for people because it is quite expensive. And also time-wise, most of the programs are pretty much full-time. Most people are not able to work. There are many basic programs that do contribute to like after hours training, you know, weekend training, or, you know, a lot of hybrid stuff so that people can continue to work and pursue these licensings. And currently, pretty much most of the schools, even the ones that are part-time, you're either in school for an extremely long time just to be part-time, or you actually pretty much have to quit work completely. My employees who have gotten their advanced licensing have basically been unable to work during that time, and it definitely set them back very much financially. So that is another problem, I think, with our curriculum with advanced, is that there's not enough options for people who really do have to work at the same time. These are not a bunch of 18-year-olds typically coming out of school, still living at home. they're commonly people that are maybe a little bit older and they do have families and they have to continue to support them and they need to work while they're in school. So it's another concern I do have with the advanced programs is just our lack of programs, our lack of options in terms of schedule, and also kind of financial aid and things like that. So it's just one thing I've really thought about a lot, especially knowing my specific employees and people I know in the business. And it does make getting the advanced degree very, very, very difficult, or the advanced license, I mean, not degree.
I'm wondering if, I know we can. We can look and see if people, like as far as the racial equity statement, it's optional that you put down, you know, gender, race, ethnicity. So what I'll probably do is pull those numbers and then show the percentage of, I mean, it won't be accurate because we know that not all of the estheticians are doing these services, but at least give an idea. And of course, I'll note that and I'll say that this is not, it's optional, so not everybody reported it. So I'll add that in. Suzanne Taylor.
Thanks. So I'm not sure, I understand what Whitney's argument is around this. I'm not sure how we're balancing within the fiscal impact statement, the fact that we have to have a minimum level of training in order to ensure safety working on the public. So reducing hours any further, even for advanced training, based on the devices that and the rules we've just put together, puts the public at risk. So is there a way to account for that within our explanation of the fiscal impact? Because this, I mean, you can't just take a few hours in a course and then go use some of these devices without the potential for harm. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah. I'll go back and listen to that, and that's why I'm noting it here. Okay. And great. Taylor and then Alicia.
I was just gonna piggyback kind of off of what Suzanne said of, obviously I totally agree with what Whitney says. I do wish that this was more accessible, but unfortunately when it comes to, you know, having lasers, having instructors and trainings and things, it is a very costly program. And then I think, obviously, I don't think we're even talking about decreasing the requirements. That's not even something we've been tasked with. So I mean, it doesn't really make sense to even have that conversation. because like Suzanne said, it becomes like a public safety issue if something were to, we're not even talking about, to my knowledge, that's not even an option to decrease the requirements for CAE. And I mean, yeah, it's an expensive program and I wish there were more options, but there's only so much that we can do on this board for that.
So CAE has the same process that, no, yeah. So they have the process where the board and HLO determine the scope of practice. So it may be that, I don't think it would be this time around, that say microneedling was originally in advanced aesthetics curriculum, but it was removed. So it may go back in, although if we think it's a crossover device, it may not, or might say that. We might put in the practice clarification, COS is limited to 0.25 or whatever. So when Cerinthia goes to do the education committee to look at either CAUS or let's say CAE, all those things would be factored in. What's in the scope, what practice clarifications we had, what does the student need to learn at the baseline competency. So maybe they will add some of that stuff back in. My guess is they would still work within the 500 hours. They would just move things around. That's what I've seen in the past for all scopes of practice, pretty much. The only one that does this or tries to do this is body piercing. Just as a point of clarification. Alicia Whitney.
I was gonna say back to the racial equity accessibility issue. I think as devices get more complicated, and if there's a device that's $150,000, then education should definitely not go down. It should be more expensive and go up because we're dealing with something way more complicated, I feel like. So I'm not sure how that even pertains, but that's pretty much it. Agreeing with Suzanne and Taylor.
And this is Maria. I also agree with the Taylor and Suzanne and Alyssa too.
Whitney.
I guess I need to clarify. Obviously, I'm not saying we should learn less or reduce the scope. I'm not really in here to reconstruct curriculum. What I'm simply saying is that in all terms of degrees, licenses, there is usually, just like we actually do have it in basic, where there are multiple schools and programs that have options for working people. And currently, pretty much most of our programs either take an insane amount of months, up to a year, to finish, so you can actually work as advanced aesthetics if you're going to go part-time. And even the part-time is still many, many days. You probably can only work part-time. Whereas many other professions, including getting master's degrees and bachelor's degrees and other things, there are options for working adults who do need to work. And so I'm not saying let's reduce, but what I am saying, we have to look at the accessibility for those being able to participate in programs that's going to allow people to work, to provide for their families. Most people even cannot take off 4 months to go full time to a 500-hour on-site program. And especially with technology and the way that we can do online courses, obviously we understand with aesthetics, some has to be hands-on. It's a given, but I do think that there is a need in our community for schools that recognize people must work, that they do need to finish in a timely fashion, and that we can utilize things like technology and offsite learning to finish up some of the coursework that doesn't need to be necessarily hands-on. And that's what we're talking about with fiscal impact. We're talking about the difference between advanced and basic. And I will say there are definitely basic programs that in our community and in our state that are, you are able to do it while you work during the day. You go at nighttime. There's like a night course. I'm not saying do less hours, but I think everyone can understand that in every single licensing or schooling or degree, there's usually options for people to continue their education if they're not in an economic situation that would allow them to completely stop working. Most people, when they're going back and getting a license or school, they typically are working adults. And so I'm just saying that there is a big lack. You can advance your career as an advanced esthetician, but it's so narrow who is able to do that. I would say personally, running 2 businesses, I cannot leave for 5 days a week and be in a class all day, but I would love to pursue my advanced. I would love that, but I am not in a situation. I would really have to go to nighttime courses. I would have to study on the weekends. I would have to do a lot of other things. And so even someone like me who could probably, I could afford it, but I don't even have the time option because I would basically have to quit my businesses. So I'm just saying that this is a cool new thing, but also we have to really think about when we start separating practices, and then we make it impossible for others to be able to access becoming licensed to do those practices. We really need to think about that. It's not about reducing curriculum or hours. It's about thinking about ways that people can pursue degrees, and a lot of working adults or people who can't take off time. So that's what I'm trying to say. I think you guys may be misunderstood. I'm not asking to augment the curriculum.
You're saying create more access. If we're start to limit the
Absolutely.
COS and they want to do these things, we need to create more access. I think that's a good point, and I think I will definitely add that in. Suzanne, Helene.
Sorry, Dad, you hit it on the head. I was trying to figure out what, I understand Whitney's argument, but I don't understand where we're putting it in the fiscal impact, because it's a private career school issue around access to the actual school, not so much how the rules are going, going to impact the fiscal side of it. So I'm just confused on what we're trying to put down. That's all.
Well, I think that's a good question. I mean, what I have as questions are, they meet the statutory guidelines of what we have to have in a fiscal impact. It definitely has more than that and breaks down how we get there. But it's kind of, I mean, saying it, in my mind, I err on the side of caution and add everything. So I would add this, something like this, around where our, if a COS had to get CAE training in order to use those certain devices. And then I would say there's accessibility issues. So I would just say it, just call it out that these are issues. I don't think it necessarily fits in one of the questions. I think this is a good question, but it's something I would say just to put it out there. Because you don't, just had this happen, you don't want something to come back around. And so for electrology, so they can do hair removal, and they get insurance reimbursement for people seeking gender reassignment surgery, so the permanent hair removal. Nobody, the RAC or the board, didn't say that there could be issues around malpractice insurance. So can they get it and they have a apprenticeship training program where a certain number of hours can be taught in a facility, and there's a supervisor. So CAE doesn't have that, but can they get insurance as a supervisor trainee in that capacity? So I didn't have that on the original fiscal impact, so I had to amend it, extend the public comment. I couldn't file on the date. It was, it just adds a layer of complexity. So as much as I can get on there, I do. So nothing is off limits. Helene?
Sorry. Yeah, as much, I do agree with Whitney, but I think it's more of a school issue. And, I think you raised a great point where it should be kind of evening classes and whatever. but that's kind of, can put it in the rules. So unfortunately, that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it in a rule. I'm just calling it out in the fiscal, saying, hey, this is a possibility, and this is gonna be issues, maybe issues for some of these people, people of lower economic status, people who haven't been high, don't have a higher degree. So that I can see where the confusion is. This won't go in a rule. This is just calling it out on the notice that we file. Those are very good questions, especially for me, it seems like it's second nature, but for you, it's not. So good questions. I do want to circle back to you to getting at least a straw vote on the device definitions. Totally breezed over that. So we have an official recommendation for each definition. So when we're done here, I'm going to circle back to that. And we've got about 25 more minutes, and I want to reserve about 10 for public comment. So is there any other comments? You can email me if you have more and I'll put them in. If you've got if you got any racial equity stuff, I'm going to put in the socioeconomic things. I'm going to go in and get the data from our database. And then I'll do some research on the side as well before I file any notice. So is there any additional things? Okay, I'm going to circle back to the definition. And so how this can work is if somebody wants to make a motion, I don't know if I need to bring them up. It seems like you all collectively agreed. So if someone wants to make a motion to recommend to both boards the approval of the aesthetic and advanced aesthetic device rule as changed today, make that somebody can say so moved.
I will do that. I'll make the motion to accept both definitions and refer that to the board.
And I just need a
Is there
second.
a second? Anybody?
So moved.
Okay. I'm going to call that a second. Then I'm going to call roll. Deborah? Just an I.
Yes.
Alicia?
Aye.
Aye.
Maria?
Hi.
Noelle?
Aye. Aye.
Suzanne?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Whitney?
Aye.
Colleen?
Hi.
Taylor?
Aye.
Great, so motion passes. This is exciting. So is there anything else that the committee wants to discuss? Other than those things we talked about? Okay, then I'm gonna see if we have any public comment. There's a little script I have to read. Let's see. At this time, the Board of Cosmetology and Board of Certified Advanced Estheticians Rules Advisory Committee will hear public and interested parties' feedback. Members of the public, please wait until you've been recognized. Once recognized, please state your name and affiliation to the board, to the committee for the record. Is there anybody on the phone that would like to comment?
Hi, Sammy. It's Liz Pasco caller here. Licensed esthetician, have been for about 20 years now. I just want to say, I really appreciate all the work you guys are putting in to what you're doing. People on the board, this isn't easy. I do want to touch base on, there was some, and I know that y'all kind of worked it out, but Whitney was talking about, I think what, she was trying to say was that extended school hours or something like that, but the schools aren't, stepping up to accommodating people. And I agree that is a school issue that obviously doesn't go into the rule. But But I also want to say something that, the skin is the largest organ, as we all know. And I think that 500 hours, and I know this isn't going to be a popular statement, but 500 hours, in my opinion, especially as much as things changed, is not enough. I think that, just as my opinion, that 4 hours needs to be at least a standard of 600. When you consider how much people put into hair, how many hours the cosmetologists are required to do just for hair, just to learn how to do hair. But hair is something that, can be cut, it'll grow back on you, provided you don't have a medical condition that it doesn't. But skin is massive. I mean, those are serious injuries. And so I do not think that any hour should be limited. And I've actually, I'm just throwing it out there to consideration because of all the changes, to maybe even increase the hours to 600, which I think is pretty much standard around most of the states, but I'm not very sure. That's it. But I do want to say thank you to all of you so much.
Thank you, Liz. Is there somebody else on the line that would like to speak?
Yes, this is Cheryl Lohman. I'm a licensed esthetician, small business owner in Corvallis. And again, likewise, kudos to the whole board. You guys are working on amazing stuff. Curious if, I hear the struggle about defining the device in the
I don't know what
laws
Loomis
and rules, et cetera. Would it make sense to have a clarification statement that actually lists the different devices and where they fit? Is that getting too much in the weeds, or would that be helpful? That's one question there. And then I had a question about, Sammy, what you said about something about, there's still a question about whether microneedling is going to stay dual in both licenses, or is it coming out of estheticians again? Just want some clarification on that. Thank you.
Is there anybody else on the line? Is that a no? Okay, hearing none. So just to clarify, I don't know, I think you have to follow the flow chart and then the definitions that the board has, or the RAC has recommended to determine if microneedling is in the scope of practice. So if you use the flow chart, or is it on the skin or hair? If it's not, then you can't use it. Is it for the purpose of keeping the skin of the human body or face healthy, attractive, and not for medical diagnosis, treatment, disease, and physical ailments? If it's not, it's no. Is the procedure temporary hair removal, makeup artistry, eyebrow and eyelash, facial treatments, and body treatments? If they are, keep going. And then is it the use of hands, mechanical or electrical apparatus or appliances or devices that do not penetrate beyond the epidermis except through natural physiological effects? So that's probably the kicker. Does it do more than does it penetrate beyond the epidermis and except for natural physiological effects? And that's so I think if this question comes up a lot, which it does, we may do a practice clarification, which would probably require maybe another type of committee. I don't really know how that's going to pan out, but at this point, we using the flow chart and then the definition that the RAC has come up with, and hopefully the board approves, and then it'll be proposed, and then all comments can be made once it's once it's proposed. There'll be a 28-day comment period and a hearing where these things can be mentioned. But at this point, trying to list a bunch of devices that change, that are always evolving. There's more devices. There's devices doing multiple things. I think that's too difficult. I think as a RAC and as an agency, we've decided to not do that unless there's some real specific devices we want to call out special. But again, this is our first time around doing this, so that like we have to make changes not that far down the road again, so. I think, ladies, I think we're done. So I'm very happy and proud of you guys for getting here. And it's been a long road and I appreciate all of your time and efforts and help. And if you have questions, email me. Don't call me because I rarely check my voicemails and I put them on the record.